Karna always found this ritual unwholesome, but playing with blood was dirty business. Calling on her vitae to give strength, she used a warm spoon to pop free the unconscious victim's eyeball. She sighed, quite human-like, as she twisted the orb from its tether and placed it in her mouth. Holding her hand out, the eye still in place on her tongue, her clanmate placed a heavy knife on Karna's palm. Without hesitation, she pulled the tip of the victim's tongue out between his teeth and sawed through the muscular organ. She placed the tip in her mouth and proceeded to swallow the two components as her fellow Tremere treated the man's bleeding orifices. Karna turned to study the Thracian text on the wall overlooking this entire macabre scene. The man had resisted her mental compulsions, had refused to translate the work willingly, and had never succumbed to torture. It was a sad necessity that she would have to take his eye and tongue to read and speak the ancient language known only to him. A kind of magic. Thaumaturgy. Quietus. The Tremere maintained that blood sorcery, or thaumaturgy as they call it, was their invention. To hear the Banu Hakeem give their version, Quietus was their blood right long before the Tremere became vampires. Other clans make the same statements. While its origins are murky, the dreaded nature of blood sorcery is not. Few kindred trust the wielders of this power that can manipulate the vitae in their veins and turn blood into poison. Unlike other disciplines, which could be described as advancing organically through the victims chosen by the vampire, practitioners of blood sorcery require teachers. The Tremere once relied on the pyramidic clan hierarchy to arrange tutelage for neonate apprentices, while the Banu Hakeem stressed that sire-child relationship as being the best form of mentorship. These nights, many a child of Hakeem washes up in Europe or America far from their sire. And with the pyramid broken, Tremere neonates frantically search through moldy tomes and palimpsests for scraps of true lore. Genuine masters of this discipline develop their own rituals, though many guard them from others, reveling in the mystery surrounding their unknown cache of abilities. To practice blood sorcery is to twist one's own blood into submission. Any form of this power reminds the vampire that they're far from human, as no mortal could wield magic in this way. Blood sorcery has changed so fucking much since its beginnings, since the days of the Path of Blood, the Lure of Flames, Weather Control, and so many other paths that was out there. And to my knowledge, it was never said to be connected to Quietus in any fashion. I miss the paths. I really do. I do miss having those things. I understand why they got rid of them to make this game more playable, but I really wish there had been more storyline on why the paths were gone. The idea that the Tremere pyramid collapsed and therefore anyone new to the clan can't learn stuff is great and all, but what about those people who were practicing prior? What about those people who were accomplished thaumaturge with multiple paths under their belt, flinging fireballs, calling lightning? I played a thaumaturge Tzimisce for a very long time, and that's actually another thing. What about all the individuals who practiced thaumaturgy that were not Tremere? What about the ministry members who had their own thaumaturgy and things like that? It's just, there's so many unanswered questions when it comes to what they've done to blood sorcery in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. My very first Metaplot Monday video was what the fuck happened to thaumaturgy. And then not too long ago, I actually did a video concerning the missing types of blood sorcery in the game. But right now we're focusing on the Tremere and the Banu Hakeem specifically. And that is something that I don't mind covering because there's a lot to take in there. I really like the fact that Path of Blood Thaumaturgy is mixed in with Quietus, because it gives the implication that the Tremere stole Quietus as a basis of their work to create the other Thaumaturgy paths. Regardless of what's going on with them now, the idea that they stole this from a clan that ends up becoming one of their most hated enemies makes so much fucking sense. The idea that Quietus was the basis for creation of Thaumaturgy. It adds lore to the game. And where I find that the blood sorcery system in general removes a lot of lore from the game, they at least gave us that little bit to play with. And we are going to be handling mostly just the blood sorcery that is located within the core book of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. Primarily because there is actually so much to talk about when we get into other powers that might be located within other books, such as Cult of the Blood Gods. The Lure of Flames is still in there, however, it is a set of rituals that can be learned instead of being a path. The Green Path can be found also as being a practice of the Bahari, of the followers of Lilith, but again, it's a set of rituals and not an actual discipline itself. And where I don't mind that, in fact, I very much enjoy a lot of the things that they've done with blood sorcery involving that. It's such a massive change that I know a lot of us are going to have to take some time to wrap our heads around that. Now, with the new guard being some members of the old guard being back in the development team, I don't know exactly what's going to end up happening with blood sorcery over time, but I can honestly say, as much as I never truly had that much desire to play Tremere, and I have played a couple of Tremere in my time as a player, I am more interested in playing a Tremere now, given what has happened to blood sorcery in my own headcanon. Personally, my excuse for the idea of why the path system has disappeared from Thaumaturgy in general is because each of the paths were connected to some elder that was in the Vienna Chantry, and when they died due to the attack of the Second Inquisition, those paths of Thaumaturgy were destroyed, and the vampires are effectively starting off at ground zero with the bare basics of that. And the idea of the Tremere rustling around trying to get their power back just adds so much story into it for me that I would be interested in playing a Tremere at that point. But let's go ahead and look at the characteristics of blood sorcery, shall we? Blood sorcery is a special discipline in that it both confers power like other disciplines and also unlocks the ability to perform rituals up to and including the level the user holds in the discipline. Its regular powers seem comparatively weak, but the versatility of the rituals more than compensates, assuming the user can learn them. At character creation, a player can choose one level 1 ritual if they have at least 1 dot of blood sorcery. Characters can buy new rituals at the cost of the ritual level times 3 experience points. So a level 1 is going to cost 3 points, a level 2 is going to cost like 6 points. Makes sense for cost. Learning new rituals during play requires both experience and time. Expect a ritual to take at least the square of its rating in weeks to learn. So we covered that kind of thing in the rituals or the ceremonies of Oblivion. So please refer to that if you want to get into the math on how long it takes. Basically, it means times it by itself. Type. sorcery. So that's interesting. It doesn't have a mental, social, or physical. I personally think it would be considered a mental, but it's marked down as type sorcery. Masquerade threat, low to high. The individual appearance of the powers and rituals in blood sorcery varies as widely as their effects. There's going to be a lot of varying noticeability when it comes to how either low-key or exuberant things are in this discipline. Blood resonance, sanguine. Although not adherent in the blood itself, blood sorcery responds eagerly to blood from human occultists, sorcerers, and cult leaders, as well as hemophiles and bibliophiles. That's interesting. I really wouldn't have considered that sanguine. When I think of sanguine, I think of adrenaline junkies and people who are sexually driven and things like that. But the idea of people who are involved in occult studies and things like that is kind of interesting. I really wouldn't have been surprised if the blood resonance for this was void, but maybe they wrote this before the concept of void blood resonance came in. Either way, sanguine's an interesting choice of words for this. Now, we are going to go through this step by step as we do for other things. And like I said, we're going to primarily just handle the stuff in the core book today. The rituals of Thaumaturgy will be done on another video. Very much like we did with the Oblivion. So let us go ahead and start with level 1, Corrosive Vitae. Altering the properties of some of their own blood. The user can make it highly corrosive to dead substances, able to corrode most items down to a steaming sludge. Given enough time and bloodshed. Cost 1 or more rouse checks. System. No additional skill roll is required. The user concentrates for a turn and forces blood through an open, usually self-inflicted wound. The user then spills their blood on a non-living object, except for unliving flesh, such as that from a kindred. To corrode and decompose. Each rouse check erodes approximately 35 centimeters of matter in all directions from the splash. This takes approximately 5 minutes. Longer on soft metal, like copper or cast iron. Harder materials, such as alloys and seals, merely scar and pit. Whether they meaningfully weaken remains at storyteller discretion. This power might corrode through handcuff chains, given enough time and vitae. Duration, non-applicable. Alright, so the concept of corrosive vitae is obviously something that's derived from Quietus. And that is absolutely okay with me, because like I said, I like the idea that Quietus was the basis for Path of Blood. I like the idea that the Tremere stole it. So that's a neat thing. When I first read this, I ended up using this power the first time I showed anybody what blood sorcery was capable of in a game. I didn't show it to them. I didn't hold their hand and walk them through it. But I had a ghoul who was a ghoul for the clan Tremere, tied up in a back room at one point, and he used the ropes to cause enough rope burn to actually rip through his skin, utilize this discipline to be able to escape. And I think that is one of the better uses for this power, is being able to use it to escape from situations such as that. But I have seen some pretty amazing uses of this by Nelly G on LA by Night, which, guys, if you have not seen that, they take a lot of liberties when it comes to the way blood sorcery works in that, because Jason Carl, I think, likes more elaborate magics, and he's integrated a lot of the older stuff into it. But Nelly G specifically, her use of her blood sorcery is well worth the watch on that one. Level 1, a taste for blood. By tasting a drop of blood, the user can discern certain basic traits of the one of whom it belonged. Cost, free. Dice pool, resolve plus blood sorcery. System, the user dabs the blood on their tongue and makes a resolve plus blood sorcery roll, difficulty of 3. With a win, the user can determine the resonance and intensity of the blood if human. They can also identify whether the blood belongs to a mortal, a ghoul, vampire, or other supernatural creature. It may not necessarily be able to identify the supernatural creature, if not kindred or ghoul. Tasting vitae also determines the relative blood potency and thus the likely generation band of the vampire. A critical win also reveals whether the subject has ever committed diablerie and the generation within one of the vampire. If the user knows of a supernatural creature in question, they can identify the specific supernatural creature on a critical win after tasting the blood. Duration, not applicable. This right here has always been, in my mind, what the first level of Path of Blood should be. That's not 100% true. If anybody remembers first edition Vampire the Masquerade, Blood Mastery was the first level, which they turned that into a ritual because it was more of a ritualistic thing to do. But the idea of being able to taste the blood and catch specific details on that is awesome. That's just an amazing thing. I think it's funny also how it does seem to overlap with what the Ventru are capable of. Level 1. Shape the Sanguine Sacrament. Alright guys, here we are inside of this special little thing. A lot of people might not even know that this power exists. This power was created for the Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition comic book, Winter's Teeth, which is going to have a continuation which will have more powers in it, but they actually have new powers within this comic book, making it a little bit part of canon. But also I wanted to make sure that people who did not know that this existed is out there and has the ability for use. This is a blood sorcery level 1 power, so instead of taking a taste for blood or corrosive vitae, you could very well take this. Learned only by the most ostentatious of Tremere. This power is used to manipulate blood or vitae into finely crafted images. Whether entertaining your fellows at Elysium with gaudy magician's tricks, or diverting flowing rivulets into painstakingly precise hermetic sigils. Cost, free, or 1 rouse check if you're using your own blood. Dice pool, manipulation plus sorcery. System, using a measure of blood or vampiric vitae, the user may channel their mastery of blood sorcery to influence the very essence of the blood itself, to obey the user's whim. By making a successful manipulation plus blood sorcery roll, the user may craft the blood into any shape or image they desire. Complexity of the image varies by difficulty. A simple message of help or a basic polygonal shape may only be a difficulty of 2, while a lengthy diatribe or intricate sculpture may be a difficulty of 4 or higher. Failure on this roll means the blood fails to form the desired shape or does not respond at all. A critical success not only forms the desired image, but negates the need for any further rolls to change the shape for the duration of the scene. Duration, for the remainder of the scene unless dispelled by the user. That does not seem like a power that would be used very often, in my opinion, and definitely agree with that this is something that the most ostentatious or attention-attracting vampires would want, but I don't really see that happening in Clan Tremere that often. And definitely I don't see that happening in the Banu Hakeem, but it does say that learned only by the most ostentatious of Tremere. So this is a Tremere-specific idea of what Blood Sorcery could be used for. And I can see this used for a lot of very interesting things, especially with the idea of being in trouble. It brings the idea of the whole dancing waters thing at some parks, where you can basically just control the flow and the dancing around. At this point, you've got blood under your control to do whatever you want it to do physically. So that is an interesting thing. I wasn't sure if many people knew that power existed, but that was something I wanted to go over. Level 2, Extinguish Vitae. The user can intentionally remove the unlife-giving properties of some of the blood in other vampires, stoking their hunger as the victim's inner reserve curdles into impotence. Cost, 1 rouse check. Dice pool, intelligence plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus composure. System. The user rolls a contest of intelligence plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus composure of a target vampire in the line of sight, while concentrating for a full turn, gesturing subtly. A win increases the target's hunger by 1, while a critical win increases it by 2. The victim can discern who afflicts them if they can see the user while making an intelligence plus occult versus wits plus subterfuge roll. Duration, non-applicable. That is a very interesting attack. Being able to make somebody hungrier in game can definitely cause a lot of problems, especially if you have a rival in Elysium. That can be something very, very interesting. I think I would have an alternate way of this, where if you've actually grappled onto the person, it's an automatic. But I guess the idea of doing the idea of it being an intelligence plus blood sorcery instead of like maybe a strength plus blood sorcery roll makes a lot of sense also. So the idea of making somebody hungry, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. It is the idea of burning off the vitae in someone, so I can see that being a very important thing. You got to think outside of the box with this one, because I'm actually thinking of ways of using this to help the person that I'm doing it, turning them from a victim to a subject. Like if they had some kind of poison or something in their body, you could use this power to help them burn it off. But just my thoughts. I'd actually like to know your thoughts specifically on Extinguish Vitae. Level 3, Blood of Potency. The vampire can concentrate their blood, increasing its potency temporarily. Cost, 1 rouse check. Dice pool, resolve plus blood sorcery. System. The user makes a resolve plus blood sorcery roll against the difficulty of 2 plus their blood potency. A win increases their blood potency by 1 for that scene. A critical win increases it by 2. The vampire can use this power to exceed their generation limits on blood potency during its duration. Duration, 1 scene or 1 night. That's a pretty interesting use of that power, because it used to be you'd be able to drop your generation. Blood of Potency, you drop your generation by, I think, up to 3 is what you could do. This is a lot more subdued and a lot more subtle of a power, and I can understand how in the description of this it said that the powers were considered rather weak compared to rituals. I can definitely see this being a good power if you're on the edge of a blood potency level, because if you can heighten it, your generation could actually drop for a small amount of time. Level 3, Scorpion's Touch. The vampire can transmute some of their blood into a paralyzing poison capable of affecting mortals and vampires alike. They can use this ichor to coat bladed weapons, or even spit it at a target. Scorpionated blood incapacitates affected mortals while hampering vampires, if not necessarily rendering them helpless. Specific breathing and biofeedback exercises practiced by some secret societies form the best defense against this blood, aside from fortitude. Cost: 1 or more rouse checks. Dice pool: strength plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus occult or fortitude. System: the user concentrates for a turn and forces blood through an open, usually self-inflicted wound. Each rouse check worth of poison made takes a turn to emit enough blood to coat one bladed melee weapon stickily, or to fill one mouthful to be spat at a foe. Spitting poison at someone involves a dexterity plus athletics attack roll, which can be dodged like any ranged attack. Although vampires have been known to French kiss a victim and transfer the poison that way. Even more subtle vampires scorpionate their blood to poison would-be diabolarists. Drinking poisoned blood from the vein guarantees a hit. Aside from such a vein to fang transmission, however, scorpionated blood is a contact poison that sublimes away in liquids and too viscous to inject with a syringe. The user cannot poison beverages with it, or, thanks to the pressure differential, inject it by their own bite. Arrowheads and bullets carry too little blood to use this power with ranged weapons. The effect does not last long enough for the user to fill hollow bullets with Scorpion's blood. If the poison hits, the user rolls a contest of strength plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus occult. Vampires with fortitude may resist with stamina plus fortitude. If the user wins, the poison does the margin of aggravated health damage to mortals and in non-halved superficial health damage to vampires. A mortal who takes even 1 point of damage collapses unconscious. Duration: the poison remains potent for 1 scene. This is Banu Hakeem. This is definitely something. Scorpion's Touch was always part of Quietus, but now that it's available to Tremere, I can see them using that for this kind of thing. This screams also like something that Toreador would definitely use as a weapon, but they really put a lot of work into this one, because I think through playtesting, they probably saw people going, well, I'm going to coat my bullets in it, or I'm going to put it in hollow tips and stuff like that. And they just went, no, that's not how this shit is meant to be used. So I'm glad that they did take everything that storytellers have dealt with for the past 20 years, 30 years, with dealing with this power and found a way to finally answer it in a rather obvious way in the mechanics in the system. So I'm very glad that that is a thing. Level 4, Theft of Vitae. Through mystical means, the vampire opens a wound in a major artery of a mortal victim. Blood shooting out through the air in the stream towards the open mouth of the user. This has the additional effect of keeping the mortal subdued, as if in the throes of the kiss, and the wound closes by itself once the effects end, whether the victim expires or not. This power is extremely spectacular, and a potential masquerade breach while in progress, but once ended, leaves no traces. Cost: 1 rouse check. Dice pool: wits plus blood sorcery versus wits plus occult. System: the user makes a beckoning gesture towards a mortal target in line of sight and rolls their wits plus blood sorcery versus the wits plus occult. A win opens an arterial wound, and the vampire can start feeding from across the room. A target wearing full body protection, such as a hazmat suit, merely bleeds ecstatically out into the suit. The user can do nothing else while feeding, but they can feed at twice the normal speed, at triple speed on a critical win, thanks to the sorceress pressure of this power. Duration: 1 feeding. Theft of Vitae was always such a fun power. It really brings back memories of playing Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen, because that's how you feed from a distance. I think it's very interesting, however, they cut out being able to use this on other vampires. The name of the power is called Theft of Vitae. Humans don't have Vitae, they have blood. Vitae is the vampire blood. So it's very interesting that they decided to cut that out altogether. I don't know if I would actually make this... Yeah. I don't know if I would make this human-specific, truthfully. I think I would allow my Tremere players to use this on other vampires if they wanted to. But it's always been able to be used on vampires to my recollection. So I could be wrong on that one, but I'm pretty sure it was. Theft of Vitae should be able to be used to steal Vitae, not just blood. So it's not called Theft of Blood. Level 5, Baal's Caress. The vampire can transmute their blood into an extremely aggressive poison, lethal to mortals and kindred alike. Cost, 1 or more rouse checks. Dice pools, strength plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus occult or fortitude. System, this power uses the same system, and its poison has the same restrictions as Scorpion's Touch, with increased damage. If the poison hits, the user rolls a contest of strength plus blood sorcery versus stamina plus occult. Vampires with fortitude may resist with fortitude in lieu of the occult skill. If the user wins, the poison does the margin in aggravated damage to mortals and vampires alike. A mortal who takes even 1 point of damage dies instantly. Damn. Aggravated damage from this poison, the user rolls a contest again. On a win, the vampire enters torpor when the next they go to sleep. Duration. The poison remains potent for 1 scene. I've got a couple different thoughts on Baal's Caress, and that is, 1, it really feels like it should be a prerequisite to know Scorpion's Touch first, because this just seems like a heightened version of Scorpion's Touch. If anything, this could just be something that would happen the more Quietus you learn. So I'm not even sure if this really counts as being another level, or if it's just you've gained more abilities to it. I don't know. Maybe I'm saying that all wrong, but that's fucking gnarly. The fact that if you do damage on a human, it kills them instantly, and the next time a vampire goes to sleep for the day, they enter torpor. That's fucking crazy. Why are not all princes hiring these motherfuckers as their sheriffs at that point? In Thicker Than Water, the chronicle that I'm running right now, the Keeper of Elysium is Banu Hakeem. So that is fun. Level 5, Cauldron of Blood. This gruesome power lets the user boil the blood of a victim in their own veins, causing massive damage and excruciating pain. While there are more efficient ways to kill, few methods approach this level of cruelty. Cost, 1 rouse check, and gain 1 or more stain. Dice pool, resolve plus blood sorcery versus composure plus occult or fortitude. System, the user pays the cost and touches the victim, dexterity plus athletics in combat or similar situations. Rolling a contest of resolve plus blood sorcery versus composure plus occult. Vampires with fortitude may resist with composure plus fortitude. On a win, each point of margin causes 1 point of aggravated damage in the victim. Mortals taking at least 1 point of damage die screaming. Vampire victims add 1 hunger per point of damage inflicted, until hunger is at 5. Duration, 1 turn. That is horrifying, as it should be. Cauldron of Blood was always terrifying. I remember having Cauldron of Blood. I don't remember ever using it. Because to me, in the games that I played Tremere, I'll fully admit that I only played Tremere twice. One of them being Jonathan Harker, who is the NPC that I'm using in my current Chronicle, Thicker Than Water. But I played him as a player character in somebody else's game first, and it was just a character that stuck with me, and I loved him so much, and I didn't want to lose him. He got Cauldron of Blood, but he never used it. That was a means to the end, because my storyteller in that game actually listened to the way Thaumaturgy was supposed to work. You have to get to advanced to be able to continue on your progression to learning more powers. So Path of Blood was a necessity. Learning Cauldron of Blood was important. I never used it. I wanted all of the Thaumaturgy that involved wraiths, which is why he's an Oblivion expert in the game that I'm running now. The other one that I played, Edward, I don't think I got past the 3rd level of Thaumaturgy. I didn't play him enough. I didn't play him long enough. But I did play as Zamitzi, who had a shit ton of Thaumaturgy, including Path of Blood. And even when I had maxed out Path of Blood for that character, I never used it. Because it was just like a look what I have kind of thing. I was more interested in using Vines of Dionysus and Path of Neptune's Might. Those were really my Zamitzi's forte when it came to Thaumaturgy. But Cauldron of Blood should be terrifying. I would have to say that Baal's Caress, or Baal's Caress, or however you want to pronounce it, Baal's Caress, that is so much of a worse power. Because, yeah, you're causing damage to someone with Cauldron of Blood, and you can kill a human on contact. You can kill a human in contact with Baal's Caress. But the concept of not just killing a vampire, but forcing them into torpor, that you might as well just be killing them. So as we can see in the core book, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition has really changed Thaumaturgy. Some would probably say for the worse, that it's not as good. We've got that other power, Shape of the Sanguine Sacrament, which is a neat, interesting thing. I might take a character with that kind of thing, but I don't know. I have a hard time seeing Tremere who are eccentric in that fashion. Like, I completely admit that Tremere probably should be eccentric. Anybody who's playing something from the Order of Hermes should probably be an eccentric in some fashion. But the concept of somebody who plays with Thaumaturgy in Elysium to attract attention or to entertain just doesn't feel right. There is more Thaumaturgy. There is more Blood Sorcery, like I said. There's some Blood Sorcery that is in Cult of the Blood Gods that is amazing. The Sabbat book is most likely going to have Thaumaturgy. We already know that it has some Blood Sorcery in it due to that Protean Blood Sorcery amalgam. So maybe, I'm surprised there's not more Blood Sorcery amalgams, truthfully. But I'm sure we'll see some stuff come up in the future. But for right now, this is what we have. The next video that I do is going to be all about the rituals of Blood Sorcery. So we will get into that in detail. I just didn't want this ritual. I do that on occasion. I call my videos rituals. I don't want this video to be exhaustively long. I don't want it to be boring for you. And I don't want it just to be a whole bunch of nonsense that people don't want to hear. So I'm splitting up I'm splitting up rituals and the discipline. So we'll be doing that next time. And then we will continue on to the Blood Sorcery that is located in Cult of the Blood Gods after that. So, with that, I am Voivode Maquette. This has been Our World of Darkness. And thank you for joining me on this deep look into Blood Sorcery, Thaumaturgy, Quietus, whatever you choose to call it. And I look forward to hearing all of your rantings about how you hate the way that Thaumaturgy has been butchered and Quietus has been defiled. No, I really do. I do look forward to hearing opinions on this subject specifically. because it's such a major change. It is such a major, major change. Thank you for joining me. Good evening.